Yeah.
What you think about that?
He didn't do it.
Think about that. He didn't just hint. Charleston White straight up declared David innocent, and he came with receipts nobody saw coming. The evidence he dropped shocked everyone, flipping the whole case on its head and leaving people questioning everything they thought they knew. When the story first broke that a dismembered body had been found in a Tesla registered to rising star David, the internet exploded. Accusations flew, wild theories spread, and outrage took over. Headlines branded him guilty before a trial even existed. Fans tore his lyrics apart, trying to link every line to confessions, while brands rushed to cut ties to protect their own image. But in the middle of all that noise, one voice cut through, louder, sharper, and fearless. Charleston White, a man known for being bold, controversial, and unapologetically raw. He shocked everybody when he flat out declared that the 20-year-old artist wasn't guilty. And get this.
Yeah.
What you think about that?
He didn't do it.
Fuck out of here. All the evidence that's out there.
He claimed the lack of an arrest was the clearest proof David was innocent. Yeah, what you think about that? He fired back at doubters, and it didn't stop there. Charleston doubled down, backing his claim with logic he said nobody could ignore. He argued that in America, young black men get locked up every single day on way less evidence. If the cops really had anything solid on David, Charleston insisted he'd already be sitting in a cell. They arrest with way less evidence, he reminded the world. They'll throw you in jail just to stall things, Charleston barked. To him, the absence of charges didn't mean the cops were cooking up some bigger case. It meant they had no case at all. He drove it home with one of his raw, unfiltered analogies, the kind that made people squirm but forced them to think. That rough comparison cut right to the core of his argument. Charleston said if it was any regular person, they'd already be in handcuffs the second a body was tied to them. The fact that David was still touring, still performing, still moving free without a single arrest, that, he claimed, spoke louder than all the gossip. And Charleston didn't stop there. He went after the darker allegations floating online, the whispers that David had been involved with a teenage girl linked to her horrific death, plastered all over social media. Fans pointed to tattoos, leaked photos, even lyrics they swore were confessions. But Charleston shut it all down, calling the whole story too neat, too staged, like a setup crafted for headlines. The way he told it, the math didn't add up.
Listen, hold on. If they find a dead body in me and your car, and this is our car, do you think they'll let me and you stay out like long? They got out. So think about this.
A young black artist supposedly tied to a missing girl with evidence splashed across the internet and still no arrest, not even a detainment. To Charleston, that silence from law enforcement wasn't sloppy work. It was the clearest sign David might not be the monster people were so quick to make him out to be. And true to Charleston's style, he didn't flinch from making people squirm. He pointed straight at the brutality of the crime. The body found dismembered, hidden, butchered with precision. He pressed his audience to think hard. Was this really David's doing? Or could it have been a setup by someone far more cold-blooded? They got all this evidence saying he did it. They claim he sliced the body up, cut it to pieces, and still no arrest, Charleston shouted. As those words hit X, YouTube, and Instagram, the internet split down the middle. Some blasted him for defending the indefensible, a man whose own car was tied to a teenager's remains. But others admitted Charleston was saying out loud what they had been whispering in private. Maybe this story wasn't as simple as it seemed. Charleston didn't just toss out one hot take and disappear. No, he locked in on this case, drilling his point home again and again. To him, David's freedom wasn't just suspicious, it made the official story sound impossible. Then Charleston pulled out one of the most infamous cases in American history, the O.J. Simpson trial. By invoking O.J., he wasn't just stirring the pot, he was exposing what he saw as hypocrisy in the justice system.
So think about this. If they got all this information on him dating a minor, an underage kid, and she looked like a white girl, mixed girl, what they let just stay free like this?
If cops can lock men away off the weakest circumstantial evidence, then why not David, who supposedly had stronger proof stacked against him? Charleston started spinning wild scenarios, painting pictures that suggested maybe someone else was behind the crime. These theories were uncomfortable, messy, and far from polished courtroom arguments. But that's exactly why people listened. He dropped them like grenades into the public square. He wasn't tied to rules of evidence or cautious legal jargon. He spoke the way the streets do, raw, blunt, and full of emotion. And that style carried weight because it made people question the official story they were being fed. In Charleston's eyes, nothing about the case lined up neatly. He even mocked the viral claim that David and the victim had matching tattoos as proof of some secret relationship. Fans online pointed to the tiny ink on both of their index fingers as evidence of intimacy, but Charleston wasn't buying it. To him, that tattoo wasn't proof. It was just another flimsy piece of evidence inflated into headlines designed to destroy David's name. And then came the line that set the internet on fire, the most controversial part of his defense. Charleston turned his criticism directly toward the narrative around the girl, using words so sharp and unsettling they infuriated many. His point was simple. He believed David was being scapegoated, and he wasn't afraid to say it in the harshest way possible. Critics came hard at Charleston, accusing him of blaming the victim, of excusing David by attacking someone who couldn't defend herself anymore. But Charleston's defenders pushed back, saying he wasn't excusing anything. They claimed he was flipping the script, forcing people to ask if the story about David was being told way too one-sided. And in Charleston's world, uncomfortable questions were always better than blind acceptance.
So you mean to tell me OJ was found with a bloody glove, he was arrested immediately? Immediately, with all the circumstantial evidence they found on OJ, they placed it. So you mean to tell me they got all of this on this and he still get to move freely amongst America?
He hammered the racial angle over and over, building his whole defense on it. They don't let black men walk away from crimes like this. Not in America, he declared. That line echoed everywhere online. For Charleston, this was his knockout logic. If a young black man had really committed something this brutal, he wouldn't be free for a single day. The fact that David was still walking, still breathing fresh air without a single charge, that, Charleston argued, meant something bigger was happening behind the scenes. That's why Charleston stood out. While others obsessed over tattoos, leaked photos, and eerie lyrics, he zoomed in on the bigger picture: race, power, and how the system plays out when cameras are rolling. By now, Charleston wasn't just questioning the case. He was ripping it apart piece by piece and daring anyone to prove him wrong. His words carried the conviction of a man who'd been studying injustice his whole life. To him, this wasn't about one rising rapper. It was about a system that had never been fair to black men suddenly looking way too lenient in a case that felt tailor-made for a quick conviction. Charleston looked at those same facts and saw innocence, because if guilt were real, he argued, the system wouldn't waste a second. His defense was unusual. He wasn't denying the evidence existed. He was saying there was too much evidence. So much, in fact, that the lack of an arrest looked suspicious to him. It was a contradiction that demanded answers. And Charleston pushed it further, daring to ask the questions most wouldn't touch. What if this wasn't David's crime at all? What if it was a setup, crafted to look airtight but actually full of holes? Those what-ifs turned Charleston's commentary into viral fuel. Some people shook their heads, calling him reckless and irresponsible, but others found themselves nodding because, let's be real, setups and cover-ups aren't exactly rare in the world of celebrity scandals. And Charleston knew exactly how to keep that tension alive. He circled back again and again to one fact no one could deny: David was still free. The man was supposedly dating a 13-year-old girl. She ends up dead, and you want me to believe police haven't arrested him? Charleston barked. To him, the answer was simple: because he didn't do it. That was the hill he chose to die on. He knew backlash was coming. He knew people would accuse him of downplaying a tragedy, of defending behavior that should never be excused. But Charleston was never afraid of backlash. He thrived on it. Charleston wasn't backing down. If anything, he was turning the volume up. He told his audience to think about every case they'd ever seen where young black men got dragged into courtrooms over whispers and rumors, arrested on suspicion, locked up on maybe and probably. And now here was a case loaded with DNA claims, tattoos, songs, cars, headlines, and still no arrest. To Charleston, that wasn't coincidence. That was proof of innocence. And for millions watching online, it was the kind of take that made them pause, rewind, and wonder if just maybe he was onto something.
So I'm saying, let me think outside the box. Maybe his mama done it. Maybe her mama done it and set him up. Maybe one of them racist uncles or cousins don't like her. Maybe the other boyfriend done it. Maybe the pimp who was sex trafficking her for the last year when she ran away done it.
Charleston's defense of David didn't come out of thin air. To really understand why his words went viral, why his opinion sparked millions of comments, and why people even entertained what sounded outrageous. You have to understand the man himself, because Charleston White isn't just another voice with a mic. He's controversy personified, a man whose life has been a cocktail of crime, redemption, hypocrisy, and spectacle all rolled into one. Charleston's story starts in Texas, born in 1977. By 14, his life had already taken a violent, irreversible turn. He was caught up in a fatal altercation outside a Foot Locker, a clash that left a man dead while Charleston was still just a teenager. He was tried as an adult, convicted of murder, and locked away until age 21. That chapter branded him for life, not just with a record, but with a permanent stain on his name. To his critics, it's the ultimate proof he has no moral high ground. That dark chapter became the foundation of Charleston's life story, a past mistake that fuels his loud mission today. After his release, he tried to reinvent himself as a community activist, even founding HOPI, Hypocrisy Over Politics, an organization meant to steer kids away from gangs and crime. For a while, it looked like he might truly be on a path of redemption, using his painful past as a warning for the next generation. But Charleston was never built for quiet redemption. His energy, his mouth, his need to provoke, it all dragged him back into the spotlight, not as a saint, but as a fire starter. By the 2020s, Charleston had become infamous for his brutal honesty, blasting rappers, politicians, and even whole communities with no filter. T.I., Boozy Badazz, and countless others found their names dragged through his viral tirades. And Charleston didn't just critique, he went for the jugular. Families, parenting, reputations.
And I know they say, man, he wrong for calling her a little hoe, but she was. Little girl don't run away from home. Little hoes and little bitches do.
Nobody was off limits. Each insult went viral. Each feud gained him more followers. And every time he pressed go live, people were left asking the same thing. Was Charleston White a truth teller or just a clout chaser willing to say anything for attention? Take his feud with streamer Adden Ross, for example. During a 2023 live stream, Charleston pepper-sprayed Ross's associate on camera, sparking instant chaos and legal threats. That single act became a snapshot of who Charleston really was: volatile, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. And if that wasn't enough, he doubled down in another infamous moment, waving stacks of cash at hecklers during a comedy show, taunting them instead of calming things down. To some, Charleston was pure comedy. To others, he was proof that he was never a reformed activist, just a showman hooked on outrage. And maybe that's exactly why people couldn't stop listening. Charleston doesn't just talk, he embodies contradiction. One minute he's condemning gang culture and preaching accountability. The next he's tearing into victims, mocking tragedies, even laughing at death itself. In September 2025, he went viral again after cursing out the family of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk following his death, brushing it off as just white-on-white crime, and laughing. That moment summed him up perfectly. Part critic, part troll, all chaos. So when Charleston speaks, people tune in for two reasons. Either they believe he's exposing harsh truths, or they're just waiting to catch him contradicting himself. Either way, his words travel fast, and that's why when he turned his fire onto David's case, it mattered. Charleston's voice doesn't exist in a vacuum. It lives right in the center of controversy. And this time, his target wasn't a rapper he was beefing with or a politician he despised. It was the system itself and his explosive claim that David was innocent. By the time Charleston threw his weight behind David, his reputation was already stitched together from scandals, viral clips, and hot takes that divided audiences everywhere. He wasn't some outsider suddenly stepping into the storm, he was the storm. His arrival in this case didn't just stir drama, it added thunder to an already chaotic scene. This was the moment Charleston stopped looking like a reformed activist and fully leaned into being a professional antagonist. Then came his explosive clashes with Boozy Badazz. Charleston didn't hold back. He straight up accused Boozy of being a terrible father, claiming his choices were pushing his kids right down the same road of crime and chaos Charleston once lived. It wasn't just shade, it was a public attack on Boozy's family.
There's nothing else put him in jail just to put a hole on him.
A dead body found in your car?
Nothing, listen, hold on. If they find a dead body in me and your car, and this is our car, do you think they'll let me and you stay out like long?
And when Boozy clapped back, Charleston only escalated, tossing out threats that blurred the line between comedy and real violence. To Charleston, it was just keeping it real. To critics, It was straight up harassment. Not even law enforcement was safe. Charleston went after police chiefs, mocked entire departments, and even bragged he'd shoot any cop who came for him. The contradictions just kept piling higher. A man who built his name preaching against gang life, while at the same time glorifying confrontation and armed defiance. And yet Charleston thrived in the chaos. Every feud, every insult, every reckless statement only made his name bigger. By 2025, he wasn't seen as an activist anymore. He was a one-man media circus. Whether he was flashing guns on Instagram Live or clowning rappers in interviews, Charleston had perfected the art of monetizing controversy. So when he jumped into David's case, critics rolled their eyes. They swore he wasn't defending truth, he was just chasing clout. And honestly, what bigger story could a provocateur latch onto than a teenage pop star accused of murder? Charleston's defense of David wasn't whispered in back rooms. It was blasted across YouTube, TikTok, and X for millions to see. People consumed it, debated it, stitched it, and repeated it until it became unavoidable. One clip alone, stripped from its full context, racked up millions of views. Some users mocked him, others stitched the video in agreement, and countless more dropped comments like, "I don't like Charleston, but he's not lying." That was the twisted power of Charleston White. His credibility was always under attack, yet somehow his influence only grew. Even people who despised him couldn't stop engaging with his content, and that's exactly why, when Charleston stepped up as David's unlikely defender, the world couldn't look away. When Charleston spoke on David's case, he wasn't just commenting on another headline, he was projecting his own life onto it. To him, David wasn't just a name tied to scandal, he was a mirror of Charleston's own troubled youth, maybe even a chance for Charleston to rewrite his own history through someone else's trial. For decades, Charleston had preached the same warning. America is quick to lock up young black men without a shred of real proof.
Why would they let him walk this freely, only to lose endorsements and sponsorships and cancel shows and not his freedom? In the climate that we're in.
And he knew that truth personally. At just 14, his life was sealed by a prison sentence, and in David's case, Charleston swore he saw the same trap he once fell into, only this time, the system hadn't pulled the trigger yet. They don't let black men walk away from crimes like this, not in America, he declared. And those words weren't just a hot take, they were a confession of how Charleston viewed the world. If the system was willing to throw him in prison as a child, then surely they'd do the same to David if the evidence was airtight. To him, the very fact David was still free screamed innocence. But underneath all the theatrics was something deeper. David, like Charleston in his youth, was a young black man trapped in a narrative he couldn't control. Guilty or innocent almost didn't matter. The court of public opinion had already branded him, and Charleston knew that pain too well. In David, he saw himself. That's the twisted irony. The same man who laughed at dead rappers, insulted victims, and thrived off chaos was suddenly casting himself as a guardian of justice for a young star the world seemed ready to crucify. Whether people believed him or not, it made the story impossible to look away from. Because at the end of the day, Charleston White wasn't just defending David, he was defending his own life story, his own survival, his unshakable belief that the system never plays fair. Here's the latest twist in D4vd's case, and the implications are chilling. Authorities confirmed the body found in the Tesla did belong to the 15-year-old girl whose disappearance had rattled the community. The details were horrifying. Her remains were dismembered, hidden in the trunk, and showed clear signs of someone trying to cover it all up. It sounded like a smoking gun, yet law enforcement stayed tight-lipped. Reporters pressed for answers, but officials repeated the same cold line: "No arrests have been made at this time." That phrase became a mantra, echoing through headlines, broadcasts, and press conferences. Meanwhile, the internet did what it always does, turn tragedy into content. TikTok sleuths dissected David's lyrics, treating tracks like romantic homicide as if they were diary entries. Fans combed through music videos frame by frame, pointing out imagery they swore tied him to the crime. Others lined up his tour dates with the victim's disappearance, hunting for overlaps like detectives on Wi-Fi. But despite all the noise, nothing solid hit the table. No DNA reports, no eyewitnesses, no confirmed digital trail, just whispers, speculation, and a mountain of circumstantial connections. Behind the scenes, though, detectives were digging deep, tracking cell phone pings, combing through communications, and even teaming up with interstate agencies, since the Tesla and body had allegedly crossed state lines before discovery. Every leak hinted that a much bigger story was bubbling beneath the surface. Charleston wasn't just defending David, he was rewriting the whole narrative. Millions of viewers, especially David's fans, started parroting his words across X. Hashtags like #FreeDavid and #Charleston set lit up timelines, climbing trends in real time. That's the strange power of viral commentary. It doesn't just respond to news, it bends it. And in David's case, Charleston White had made himself the loudest pen on the page. His defense spread like wildfire, and the ripple effects reached far beyond his own platforms. Suddenly, mainstream outlets were forced to cover him too. Journalists who had stuck to investigative reporting now found themselves writing about Charleston White, a man with no badge, no legal training, just a megaphone too loud to ignore. Opinion pieces flooded in overnight. Some labeled him reckless, blasting him for undermining a sensitive investigation by declaring innocence without evidence. Others begrudgingly admitted his point about the lack of an arrest wasn't entirely baseless. Love him or hate him, one fact was undeniable. Charleston had dragged the case into a brighter, messier spotlight. Meanwhile, David's fan base split into all-out war. On one side were the loyal supporters, many of them teenagers, who clung to Charleston's words like gospel. They quoted his analogies, stitched his clips, and echoed his mantra. He'd be locked up already. On the other side were furious critics who saw Charleston's defense as spitting on the victim and her grieving family. Online debates got vicious, so vicious that some users even doxed each other over their stances. What should have been a solemn investigation turned into the internet's bloodiest new battlefield. Several companies that had quietly backed away from David after the scandal now found themselves stuck in a trap. Do they cut ties completely and risk losing his millions of fans? Or do they wait it out, worried Charleston might actually be right and David could one day be cleared? That uncertainty froze endorsements in place. David's public image sat in limbo, neither destroyed nor repaired, dangling in the court of public opinion. Meanwhile, law enforcement didn't flinch at trending hashtags. They rarely called Charleston out directly, but subtle pushbacks started surfacing. Leaks suggested investigators were still deep in the grind, combing through hours of surveillance, online messages, and witness accounts. Anonymous sources whispered that the lack of an arrest wasn't proof of innocence, it was strategy. Prosecutors, they said, didn't want to rush charges only to lose big in court. But that quiet resistance only fueled Charleston even more. He seized on every delay, every vague press release, every no comment as proof the system had nothing. To Charleston, the stall wasn't strategy, it was desperation. And the longer it dragged on, the louder his voice grew. It was a question nobody seemed able to answer cleanly, and that silence mixed with Charleston's relentless commentary reshaped public opinion day after day. What began as a murder investigation had twisted into a cultural firestorm. Now it wasn't just about a body in a Tesla, it was about race, justice, fame, and who really gets to decide guilt in the age of viral content. The loudest voice in the David case wasn't a police chief or a prosecutor, it was Charleston White. As weeks turned into months, the investigation transformed into something far bigger than one crime. It became a mirror reflecting how society devours scandal, celebrity, and controversy in the digital age. And right at the center stood Charleston, louder than the cops, bolder than the lawyers, and more viral than the journalists clinging to the facts. Meanwhile, the official investigation crawled forward, slow, quiet, methodical. Detectives tracked digital trails, sifted through evidence, and worked with federal agencies across state lines. But for David's fans, Charleston's voice was louder than any press release. It was hope. At a time when the world seemed ready to bury their idol, Charleston gave them permission to keep believing in him. His arguments, flawed or not, became a script for pushing back against the headlines. And in the online era, sometimes the story being told matters more than the facts underneath it. Fans, critics, even the media all got caught in the same trap, waiting for charges, waiting for an arrest, waiting for answers. The case isn't closed, the truth isn't fully revealed, but the impact, undeniable. Charleston White didn't just jump into a national story, he hijacked it and rewrote its rhythm. He made David's supposed innocence just as loud as the crime itself, flipping whispers into debates, debates into viral content, and content into raw influence. The consequences are still unraveling. David's career hangs in the balance, suspended between a loyal fan base ready to defend him and an industry too scared to stand beside him. For for law enforcement, the stakes are even higher. If they make a move without airtight evidence, Charleston's words will come back to haunt them in every headline and hashtag. And for the public, this case is a warning shot about how fast truth can get tangled in clicks, clips, and commentary. So what do you think about Charleston White's shocking defense of D4vd? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.